Good evening. This is Janet DeSantis. I'm with the Mountain Island Library branch location. This is the last session in the real life crash course series of building your nonprofit. Tonight I have the pleasure to introduce our last speaker. She was also our first, Kim Roseboro. She will be talking this evening on funding your vision and creating sustainable foundation giving. Just going to give you a brief background on Kim, and then she can take it over. So Kim has a passion for public service, and she also has the ability to motivate and mobilize individuals to action. Kim is currently recognized within the Charlotte community as an emerging leader in the nonprofit industry. Kim also has 25 years of experience working in this field. Kim currently serves as the founder and executive director of Firm Foundations Youth and Family Outreach Incorporated. That is a nonprofit organization that places a strong focus on program impact and accountability, specifically for adolescents and their families. Kim is also the founder and senior consultant of Visions at Work Consulting, which is a full-service consulting firm that specializes in working with individuals and nonprofit organizations to reach their full potential. So with that, I want to say welcome, Kim. It's great to have you back. And we appreciate everything that you've done for us. And Kim, you can take it over. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye. See you. Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, thank you, Janet. It is a pleasure and an honor to be with everyone again. Special thanks to Charlotte Mecklenburg Library for inviting me to share. I consider this sharing my story. And just sharing this resource to individuals that have a passion for nonprofit management. Because there's not a lot of resources out there that I experienced as I was developing and growing and starting my nonprofit organization. So being a part of something as essential as this, I'm definitely honored. And so we're going to jump right on in. Again, this is a conversation style presentation. I definitely want to hear your questions. So please save those questions, write those questions down. If you have something that you want to post because you may forget about it, feel free to post that. And if I don't stop and answer it right then, we will definitely get to it. And so I want everybody to feel comfortable with that. That's my presentation style. I like to connect with those that have joined us for this presentation tonight. So thank you. And we'll go to the next slide. As I'm thanking you all, I want to say congratulations. I do not take it lightly for anyone who has made that decision to join presentations like this to better your knowledge, to increase your knowledge. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Unless we take the first step into the unknown, we will never know our potential. So as you are continuing to grow, as you are continuing to find out information about nonprofit management and how you can implement a vision that you may have in regards to serving our community, this is a first step. This is a big step. This may not, even if it's not your first step, this is a step toward improving yourself, increasing your knowledge. So congratulations in that growth. And I just, again, consider it an honor to have you with us. Now we can move right on to the next slide. Janet did a great job of introducing who I am. And, like she mentioned, I've got over 25 years of nonprofit experience. I have worked from program assistant to site coordinator to coordinator, regional director of youth programs, area director, fund development, communications, board member of nonprofits. So I have been around the nonprofit world. And at each level, I made it a point to learn and grow so that I could share my experiences with others that have the desire to be in those positions. And so I have a passion for nonprofit. I have a passion for serving the community. I have a specific passion for youth and definitely, that's anyone who knows me, this knows that that's where my heart is, and with sharing and building up others that have the same passion. Janet mentioned Visions at Work, and I'm excited to share that we have really actually expanded Visions at Work to not just include nonprofit consulting, but we are also including youth development services as well, all under one umbrella in a for-profit a manner. And so we have gone through a name change, Impact Learning and Youth Development Services. And so we do nonprofit consultant work. We do youth development consulting. So those that are creating youth development programs, we provide services for that as well. Firm Foundation's Youth and Family Outreach is the nonprofit organization that I founded. I still serve as executive director. It is a passion of mine. As I have mentioned before, that I've got years of experience working in other nonprofits. And what I saw was, as I was working in those organizations, were some different gaps, and especially when it came to serving older youth. And so as I was growing and observing and collecting information, I created Firm Foundations to address some of the gaps in services that I provided. And that's a key thing when you're looking at your nonprofit organization, or as you're thinking of establishing a nonprofit organization, look in the gaps in services so that you're not just replicating things that are already being done, but really to make your organization unique, look at what gaps in services that you can provide, and then create your organization out of there. And so, enough about me. For those of you who are on here live, I know some of y'all may be live, some may be listening and a recording. But if you are on here live and you've already started, you are in the infant stage of your nonprofit organization, where you are established and you've received some funding. You may not be at the $100,000, $500,000, $1 million mark yet, but you've received some funding that has allowed you to perform some of your programs. If you can just drop a $sign in the comment box so I can see just how many of those individuals are on here. Just put a $sign in the comment box. For those of you who you may just be in the thought process, or you may have just submitted your paperwork, and the ink is still wet. You are in the very, very beginning, and you have not received any funding yet, but you are about to take that leap into fund development. If you can just put a question mark, because you probably have a lot of questions as you're preparing for this journey. So again, if you're live, I want the $sign if you've started and you've got funding, and the question mark if you are in the very beginning and you have not received funding yet. So that kind of gives me an idea of who we have on here live, that I'm able to maybe tailor some of the conversation in regards to meeting your needs. But if not, we will still share a lot of information that'll benefit both parties. All right. So moving right along, next slide is today's objectives. Number one, to learn strategies and processes for finding and obtaining funding for your vision. It's one thing to find, opportunities. There's grants that are out there. I can tell you that, it's honestly not that hard to find the funding, but obtaining the funding is another thing. So we're going to discuss both. And then really understanding why and that mission matters when it comes to fundraising and finding funds for your vision. And then we're going to learn those essential steps to empower you to start now. I want you to be able to walk away and say, I need to do X, Y, and Z. And I have that knowledge now, and I can get started now. And then I also want you to feel confident in starting now. So I hate going to workshops and it was just blah, blah, blah. And I don't have the steps, and I still feel as lost as I did when I first started the workshop. So I'm hoping that by the end of this, you at least feel a little bit more confident in finding funding for your program and your vision, because funding it's that, I hate to say it is that F word that people are just fearful of. And so I want to kind of take that fear away from us when it comes to funding. And we know how essential funding is for our organizations and our vision. So I want you to really just be a little bit more confident in regards to having a conversation and to creating an action plan in regards to funding your vision. Next slide, please. Great companies are great because the founders want to change the world, not make a fast buck. So if you are listening to this presentation and you are one of those that think, oh, I'm just going to start a nonprofit and grant money is going to come to me, and all is going to be well. That's not the case, right? So I want you to take the mindset away of fast money, and just really relying on what we hear of grants, right? It's not fast money out there, and we never want to rely 100% on grants for our organizations. So that's one of the big myths about starting a nonprofit that I really want to pop that bubble and say it's more than just grant money. And it's not as easy to obtain the grants, even if you have a phenomenal program, even if you are a great writer, there's still a lot that goes into play when it comes to finding funding for your grant. So you have to stay connected to your mission and your desire to make an impact and change in the world. All right, next slide, please. So we're going to go through this cycle of finding and obtaining funding for your organization. And so this is the cycle that I use. It may not be textbook, but this is my real walk in regards to what has worked. This is the walk that I'm still walking, because you will learn that even if after you establish your nonprofit organization, you still have to go through the cycle over and over again in regards to finding funding. And so the first thing is the setup. Are you grant ready? It's one thing to have an idea in your head. It's one thing to have a passion and love what you're doing and to have this belief, but are you grant ready? Okay. Step 2, the implementation. What would you do if you found the funding? And I like to think about this. If you were to get on the elevator and someone asked you, what do you do? And you start sharing about your desire to have this nonprofit organization that is just going to change the lives of youth all over. And they wanted to know, and they had the resources to give you. And they said, well, what do you need? How much money do you need to do that? You need to be ready to be able to have that conversation and that answer. And so just having that, always being aware of what you need so you can be prepared to answer that question if it happens. And so we'll talk about that implementation. What do you need in order to implement your vision? And the third one, making connections. That is another part about finding funding, is making the right connections. Every grant that is out there, it is not for you. Every funder that is willing to give money may not be the connection for you. And so we're going to talk about making those connections. And then we'll talk about the results. Either you received the grant or you got denied. There's a learning lesson in both. And then fulfilling the grant requirements. And stewardship, what do you do if you did receive funding? There's steps that need to be taken as well with that also. And so this is a cycle. Like I mentioned, it continues to go on and on. And so we're going to walk through this cycle. And so if we can go to the next slide, we'll start with the setup. Are you grant ready? We talked about funding. And everybody wants to run the grants, but are you really ready? And are you realizing that there's more than just grant money out there? And so he who fails to plan plans to fail. And if you're not ready, that's what's going to happen. That grant is going to slip right through your fingers and it's not going to be for you. Next slide, please. So we have to be strategic before we even look for funding, before you even open your mouth to ask somebody for funding. We need to be strategic about this. And so number one, ranking your needs. Just really, what do you need? The one thing I hear a lot from people is, oh, I need an office space. I just created my business, my nonprofit, and I need money for office space. And so they rank that as a need. And what I want to say is, I understand that you need a location so that when people say, well, where do you serve? Where are you located? You have an answer. But we have to be more strategic about, do we ask for money to have an office space, or do we ask for money to implement program in a certain location? There's a difference in that conversation. And so as we talk about program implementation, we're going to really will need to look at that piece. And so that's when we talk about being strategic and understanding what do you need funding for, and be able to be detailed about that, and not just having a conversation. So many times when people are talking about funding and talking about what they want to do in the community, it's a great conversation, and you have some people that are so good at having conversation, they can really hype you up and get you excited about it. And then you have to realize that even though we are a nonprofit organization, we still need to adapt many of the for-profit business models. And one thing that I recommend is looking at the business models. So just like if you have a for-profit company and you want funding and they go to the bank, and one thing you have to have is a business plan, right? But for some reason with nonprofit, we feel like we don't need that formality of having a business plan. And even if it's not the same exact format of a business plan, you still need it. You need to have written documentation of your vision. It can't just be up here in your head, your heart, or even just in a scattered notebook. You need to have this documented, typed up, saved, ready to and packaged, to be ready at all times to provide this for anyone who may ask you. So being strategic on how you lay this out, take your time to actually sit down with all those ideas, everything that you want to do, and package it so that it really has that formal look as a business plan. Here we go to the next slide, please. In the beginning of your vision plan, your business plan should be your mission statement. So mission matters. People, foundations, they have to be able to connect to your mission. And so having an established mission statement is key to this piece. It's not an idea. This is a formal mission statement that breaks down who you're serving and the impact that you are going to make. And so that's step one in really looking at the implementation on what you want to do, where you want to do it, and for who. So making sure you have a developed mission statement is key. Say that one more time. Having a developed mission statement is the key part in creating your funding and asking for funding and writing grants and having events. Everything needs to go back to, this is going to our mission. All right. And then with the program development, so the programs that come from your mission. So the program are the activities, the things that are going to bring about the impact that you talked about in your mission statement. So your target audience, who do you serve? Is it a youth? Is it the elderly? Is it the homeless? Is it children in foster care? But being able to pinpoint your primary target audience. For example, Firm Foundations, our primary target audience is adolescents, right? And so that's our target group. Now, since we started with that, but now we have grown where we have younger children also that we serve. But our primary target audience that we will always say are adolescent youth. So being able to have a primary target audience is key. Where are you serving them? So I mentioned about office space, right? A lot of people want to get that office space. So I can say I have an office. And that's not necessarily always needed. So for years, Firm Foundations, we did not have an office space. And we have been providing programs since 2010. And we did not get our own office space until 2017. And so what we were doing, though, we were utilizing and we built partnerships. We were in rec centers, we were in schools. And so we had a location where we could show where we were serving. And what we would also share with potential funders and funders is that we were choosing to utilize our dollars to go directly to the impact of the youth. And so rather than putting funding into an office space, where someone really wasn't present in that space because we were out in the field so much, we chose to use the funding for programs. And so don't always feel caught up that you have to have office space and you have to have funding. And that's the first place that you want to tell people that you're getting funding for. I honestly wouldn't share that that's what we're doing with funding. And a lot of the grants, you will see that they won't even support general operations support, especially as a startup, as a nonprofit startup. As you're looking for funding, donors and foundations, they are going to want to support direct services, the direct program, the materials, the things that are very programmatic versus general operation funds, especially more so as a smaller organization. And in your program development, how do you serve them? What are you doing? Are you providing tutoring? Are you providing mentoring services? What are you doing? And being able to lay out those specific activities. What are you doing? Who's doing them? And when are you doing them? And then what is the impact? The impact is probably I'll tie that back into the mission because that should be reflected in your mission statement. But what is the impact that you're making? What is the change in behavior? What is it? Because we want to be a part of that. That's really what funders, anybody who's giving money, anybody who's giving their time, they want to know that this is going to make a difference and they want to be a part of it. And so that's something I want to touch on too, because our title is Funding Your Vision. But I also want you to look at funding from 3 different levels. Of course, we have the monetary funding, that's the dollars, the things that are going to pay the bills. But funding can also fall into in-kind donations. And so if I'm able to get tables and chairs donated, well, those are tables and chairs that I did not have to find money for because someone gave them to me. There is a dollar amount associated with those, and I didn't have to raise money to go get that and make that purchase. Funding and support and resources also comes because of your volunteers. So when you're looking at funding, and that word is very cliche, and that's what we use, and that's what we're used to, but look at it more as resources. And so volunteers are resources that are, honestly, you can attach dollar amounts to them as well. There is a there's a dollar amount for every hour that volunteers give because that's staffing that you may not have to have hired that are helping to develop, implement your mission statement. So change the mindset of funding and look at overall resources. And so in the beginning, especially in the beginning as a startup, because that is the hardest time to find the funding because you're building from the ground up. And it's hard to gain the trust, and we'll talk about ability. But you're trying to gain the trust of the community. You're trying to gain the trust to invest in you. And so your way of building that, you have to look at those other resources because it's easier to in combination, go somewhere as a volunteer, they help, mentor, they'll be a tutor so you can get the actual monetary funding to pay for tutoring. And so really looking at all these resources as you are developing this program and really looking at your program and saying specifically, what is it that I need? Okay. So in your budget, as you're creating this program, list everything that you need because you have to have a budget and a dollar sign and know what your ask is. It's probably the biggest amount of time that you are going to spend as you prepare to find funding for your vision. Is this the mission and your program development piece? We can go to the next slide. Beginning with the end in mind, it's one of my favorite habits. If you've read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, do what you can with what you have where you are. So a lot of people may feel that I don't have the budget, I don't have the funding. This is my vision. I have an idea. I know what I want to do, but until I get funding, I can't do anything. I'm a believer that there is something that you can do. So do what you can with what you have where you are. And so an example of this is And so the ultimate goal of Firm Foundations is to provide a teen center and all these youth development support services, the whole 9 yards. Well, from day one, I didn't have the resources to provide the whole 9 yards, but what could I do with little of nothing, right? Because I'm self-funding, I'm doing everything out of my own pocket, but I need to be doing to show others how sure I am about this mission, and to build that history and that experience. And so, what I knew I could do is recruit volunteers. I could find youth, and so we developed a mentoring program, right? And so we were able to start that just to show and just to kind of build it. And it just kind of has that snowball effect. You start with what you have. You think hard. You may have to be more strategic. Don't get discouraged that you can't do everything, but start with what you can do. And then that's going to build the history. Because talk is cheap. People can talk, like I said, people can talk all day long what they want to do. But if you're not doing anything, they're not able to show them, then it's going to be hard to believe that you really have a plan. Next slide, please. And as you're doing that, this is another thing as a startup organization, someone that has a vision. And this is a key thing, because as you are applying for grants, as you are seeking funding, as you are approaching different individual donors for money, you're competing against all the other nonprofits. There's so many other people that are out there that are donating, that are requesting for funds. And so they don't know who you are if you are a startup. And especially if you haven't done anything, they really won't know who you are, right? And you're not able to talk about experience. So right now, like this image shows, you're on the left with the promise, but you need some experience, right? You need that experience in order to fulfill the promises that you have mentioned in your mission statement. And so you can't get the experience. You can't fulfill the promise of your mission statement if you aren't doing anything to build your own experience. And so one example is that, like I mentioned, I have over 25 years of nonprofit experience. A lot of my experience was, with youth. So you would think that as I jump out here, that everybody's just going to believe, I got it. But I had to build the experience of my own organization. So yes, Kim did X, Y, and Z with this well-known organization, but Kim had to do X, Y, and Z under the name of Firm Foundations in order to build that credibility. So I had to show them that this is what this organization can do. And I'm an asset to the organization, but this organization can produce. And I promise you that we can fulfill the mission. So, and as you're building this credibility, documentation is key. And so the data that you collect, if you need to do the pre and post surveys, you need to gather testimonials from those that you're serving, because you're having to prove yourself. You're having to prove to others that you are a justifiable organization. You have to present yourself as a professional, and you have to really gain that credibility. Another way to gain the credibility is by building partnerships. That is a key thing. Build partnerships. Be strategic in building those partnerships as well. And so I looked at organizations and entities, if it was churches, if it was Mecklenburg County Park and Rec, the library, but I looked for other established organizations, recognizable entities that others trusted. And if I could gain those organization and entities' trust to partner, to do pro bono services just to kind of get that connection, to run pilot programs for them. But you have to be strategic in building that credibility to show, hey, this organization trusted me to implement these things, and I provided the impact. This is what we can do. Because again, it's that credibility, because you are a startup, right? We're having to prove ourselves. It doesn't sound fair, but if you think about it, if you were a millionaire and you were wanting to invest in somebody, number one, you want to know that they know what they're talking about. You have seen their resume, you've seen what they've done, even if it's with a little bit. But if you can't tell that this person really knows what they're doing and they have nothing to show you that they've done this, you are just naturally going to give it to the person that's well known, the person that has shown themselves established. So you are fighting as a startup nonprofit. The reality is we are fighting to get at the table, and you are fighting to eat at the table. And it's a constant fight until you rise above and you're able to prove yourself. And so that can be the frustrating part when it comes to funding your vision, but you have to remain strong. You have to make sure that you're doing your part, and you're doing your part consistently. And so that building that credibility piece is key. Next slide, please. And I talked about, with the making connections, we'll start with the one, identifying people who need to know who you are. And so this is a little bit different than building your credibility. And so this is when you're looking at who has resources that could benefit your mission, that could help you, let me not say benefit your mission, but who has the resources that help you implement your mission. Because either A, they have the same interests that you have, B, they have the opportunity where maybe they have the youth are coming to them. And so they have the clientele, they have the target population that you have. But being very strategic and identifying those people that need to know what you have to offer and making that connection. Once you have identified that, and you can even do something like looking at similar organizations, such as yourself, and seeing who supports them, because you want to really find out who has an interest and who needs to know you as well. So making sure you document that and then share your mission to them. And this is before and on here, it doesn't say go ask them for money. All right. I said, share your mission with them. Your first encounter doesn't need to be, can you give me money? Your first encounter just needs to be sharing your mission, sharing your impact, right? Just letting them know who you are. If it's just mailing a letter, shooting an email, but the more people who know about you, because I tell you, some of these funding opportunities are not advertised. Some of these funding opportunities are by invite only. Some of these opportunities can just be because we heard what you're doing and here's a check. Those funding opportunities that we've received like that are the ones that are just, it's just an eye opener. It's just reiterating that we're doing great work. We're making an impact. And so you want to make sure as many people see what you're doing or share your mission, share your impact. And this is why it's so important when I mentioned earlier about starting now. Don't wait until you have everything laid out. You start with what you have now so that you're able to share that information. You're able to create these meet and greet opportunities where you're just inviting them to come to a Zoom and you're doing your presentation, just sharing what your vision is. And you don't have to be implementing everything in your vision, but giving them this opportunity to hear what your mission is, hear what your current programming and what you currently are doing, but also laying out what you plan to do in the future as well. So during these meet and greet opportunities, that's what you want to do. Now, I've been there, done that with these meet and greets, and don't get discouraged as a startup if nobody comes, right? And that can be, it can get you, I'll be honest with you, but you did it. And so that's the thing, you have to follow through with a lot of things as a startup where people are not going to show up. People may not respond initially, but you have to build that track record. So say you scheduled a meet and greet next Wednesday and nobody showed up. It was just you and Zoom, right? Well, you still have that out there where they know, where they can reflect and say, oh, okay, they did a meet and greet 2 weeks ago. They don't necessarily know nobody showed up, but they know that you hosted and you provided that opportunity. So again, it's that action. That action will create traction. That'll create awareness. And so you have to continuously put your information out there, create opportunities for people to come and see and hear what your mission and vision are. Your approach, of course, I mentioned the meet and greet events, but also utilizing social media. That's a beast that we have to just jump on board with that. And that's something that I think I know myself. I'm having to learn it and utilize it, because it's probably even becoming more prevalent where people go to your social media versus going to a website. And so having that established presence is really, really becoming vital, and staying relevant and current. And so if everybody else is going to TikTok, guess what? We got to go to TikTok. And that's even something that, just being transparent, I'm realizing everybody's at TikTok. So you know what? We've got to figure out ways to utilize TikTok. And especially just as a startup nonprofit, you have to stay in the know with the trends, pay attention. I recommend even following, larger organizations and seeing what they're doing, and doing it. And that'll help you grow as well and staying relevant. Um, and then, of course, I mentioned the meet and greet events. That is key in doing that also. Next slide, please. The right fit. So there's a lot of grants out there, and I think we've all heard that there is money out there. There is. Finding grants, honestly, is not that hard. There's a lot of tools, a lot of resources where you can log on and you can find grants. I recommend you find out what these resources, and I'm going to share a couple of resources a little bit later, but before you even get to the point where you are hiring somebody, especially in the startup phase, and just being diligent and being strategic with your startup funding, look and see what resources are out there that you can use, because there's money out there and there's free ways to find where these grants are. So when you see all of these grants and you hear about all of these grants out there, I want you to realize that every grant is not the right fit for you. And you need to remain true to who you are versus trying to change in order to fit a grant. And that's key. And I want to repeat that because it's so important. Remain true to who you are as an organization. Whatever you said your mission is, whatever you said your target audience is, remain true to that versus trying to fit into a grant where we call chasing the money. You don't want to chase the money because it's gonna end up biting you in the butt. So remain true to who you are and find that right grant. So when it comes to funding, there's different as your organization status. So as a startup nonprofit, once you obtain your 501c3, there's going to be more opportunities of finding funding. There are some very, very few incidences where you can find funding when it comes to grants without the 501c3. So I know there's some government grants where you'll see sometimes where it's for profit or nonprofit or a church. So there are opportunities such as that. There's opportunities where individuals can give money to you at a certain level without having your 501c3. And so just being aware and being knowledgeable of what your status is so that people will know, okay, are you 501c3? You need to know whether you are or not. You need to know if you have your charitable solicitation license, which gives you the right to actually go out and fundraise. So being very aware of your status, identifying your geographic focus. So that is something too, when you're looking at funding or you meet people who may only want to give to North Carolina or Charlotte residents, or I know this one group in particular, they are North County. It's a women's club in North County, North Mecklenburg County. Well, that's where they give. And so when you see things, it may be tempting to be, oh, well, we could serve in that area. Just be mindful that they're going to ask questions that are going to be specific to that area. So you don't want to come across as being suspicious and kind of devious. And that's why I mentioned stay true to who you are. Again, going back to credibility, you are in the infant stages of your business. Don't jeopardize the integrity of you or your organization. So definitely stay true to who you are, because word travels. And so you don't want to build a brand where people aren't going to want to give to you because of your credibility. So being aware of what your geographic focus is. Your target audience, we mentioned that again. So if this grant says that we serve children that are birth to pre-K, well, don't waste your time submitting an application where you're serving elementary. It's not going to happen. For example, if it's, I think the Belk Foundation, where they serve a particular age group, stay with what you know. You don't want to waste time. As you're building a nonprofit, you don't have time to waste. I can promise you that. So being very strategic, being knowledgeable, and understanding that every grant, every funding opportunity is not for you. Mission alignment. Again, if it's not your mission to provide X, Y, and Z, then it's not for you. What I will say in a situation like this, you can always partner with an organization, and perhaps they will apply for the grant, and it could benefit your target population that you do. So again, that mission alignment. Don't try to make something fit that it's not supposed to fit for you. And another thing that is important is researching the funder. So what I like to do is when I see a grant is out there, or I've heard on the news that somebody has given money, just being aware. Again, we talked about trending, staying knowledgeable of the field. Go research that funder, because if they are giving money out, you want to find out how can you get a piece of the pie too. And so find out who they've given to, and see if it fits you. Because if they are giving to minority women, and you have a big focus on minority women, then I suggest that you reach out, and we talked about making connections. You make a connection with that funder. Don't ask for money, just make that connection if it's somebody new. And so being very strategic, and start building and creating this spreadsheet. So having this spreadsheet that lists the funders, and every funder pretty much always has an area focus. And so maybe that area of focus I mentioned was minority women. Maybe their area of focus is STEM, technology, but being very strategic on, okay, this funder likes to fund literacy, this funder likes to fund this. And so even when I'm approaching a funder, I can approach them with a conversation about what I know that they like to focus on. So if I'm holding a meet and greet event, and this person who I know has given money because I've done the research, in my conversation and in my presentation, I'm going to make sure that I make it aware of this is what we do. So an example, Dollar General Literacy Foundation. We know that their focus is literacy. And so if there is a representative that you want to meet and they come in conversation, or they attend one of your meet and greets, definitely highlight your literacy programs, right? And so this is just, I don't know about you all, but when I used to do job interviews, we tell people to research the employer. Well, research these funders. And I'm not talking about just the foundations, but also individuals. And so there's individuals that we know are giving money. So see who they've given to before. And when you're having a conversation with them, or when they attend an event, or if they're coming to tour your program, make sure you're highlighting something that you know that brings that they're interested in, so they can see, hey, you doing that too. Well, I can support your organization as well. But again, that goes to researching your funder, right? Knowing your program. So going back to our program implementation and building and understanding, what do we need funding for, so that you're able to have that conversation. All right, next slide. And so these are some resources. I think it's always important to share knowledge, and definitely share free resources. that I'm aware of. And so the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, of course, I encourage you to, if you go to one of their regional branches, they have access to the foundation directory online. And though you may have limited time on the computer now due to some COVID restrictions, in advance, have the information that we talked about. So in advance, you need to know that what you're looking to fund, right? And so looking for funding for a program that you've developed. So if it's STEM, if it's technology, if it's literacy, if it's mentoring, already have these categories mapped out so that you're using your time effectively. Because when you're going there, you're able to pull up, oh my goodness, foundations, corporate donors. It's just a big list of people who have given, and you can find out who they've given to, how much they've given to, and then you'll be able to be more strategic about approaching them. And so this is getting away from just the grants. So everybody understands grants. Oh, we're going to find a grant. I'm going to find a grant. I'm going to get a grant, and my nonprofit is going to be great because we've got this one grant that we're going to live off for 20 years. It doesn't happen like that. And so you need to have a diverse stream of revenue. So you have your grants that you do apply for, which is great. But then, as I mentioned, making those connections. So you may have made connections with individuals who will give money, but you also can make connections with corporate sponsors. And so that's something that you can get from this directory online. So really looking at not just grants, but corporate sponsors, individuals. When we're doing these meet and greet events, who do we invite? Well, we look at this list on the foundation directory, and we need to find somebody from this company to come to our event, or to bring to the table so we can talk to them about our program. And so this directory is a really great resource. It's free. It's been there for years, y'all. Okay. And it needs to be utilized. So I highly suggest you use that as a resource. There's another resource called eCivis, which is another free. And now that I look at it, it's all Mecklenburg County. So it's your county dollars are actually giving you access to all this information. But it's a grant locator, same kind of concept where you can actually filter down what you want to fund. So again, going back to our program implementation, the kind of funding, if you want, I always search non-matching. So the matching grants mean that if I'm asking for $50,000 and they may require me to match it with 20%. So what I'm looking for, the easiest thing to do is just to take the filter. Don't show me any that require matching, especially as you're starting up. And so being able to filter and go through these grants and find ones that work for you is another great resource. And so here, I just want you to look at that email address. You can email that contact person and they can set you up with a free account. It's called eCivis. You can also, it sets you up for work plans where you can get alerts. It's a great free resource that I highly recommend. What all should be covered in the meet and greet, and how long is too long to meet and greet? Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. I'm gonna pause right there because that's an excellent question. So I did not include this in my presentation, but I will recommend, I'm going to share some information with you. But one model that I like to utilize is called the Benevin Model. That's BENEVON. And this model is very strategic, where it tells you details on these kind of events, right? So from my experience, this is what I've done and what I've seen works. And so these meet and greets, I would set them up just for an hour. The content of your meet and greet, and now with COVID, we're making adjustments too. This can be done via COVID, via Zoom, by doing a presentation. But what should be covered, I'm going back to the mission statement. I will always tie in that mission statement, but it's basically, who are you? And so your mission, your vision, right? Your history. How did this come about? If you're in the very infant stages, this is a time where you can be transparent. And maybe if it's something, trying to think of an example, if it's something that has hit home with you. So maybe it's to support youth in foster care. And maybe because it hits home with you because you were one of those youth that came out of foster care and you thrived and you know what was needed to thrive. And so there's that story. And so you want to be transparent and authentic in sharing your story about how it started, why you started this, and then connecting the mission, the vision. So this is what you want to do, and then painting that picture of we want to provide mentoring services. We want to establish. We want to help youth in foster care have access to jobs or career opportunity. I mean, college. So lay out what the vision is. And so again, like I mentioned, we can all have these ideas, but we've got to plot it down. We've got to lay it down and be very specific so that when we're presenting this, people can see that you've got a solid vision, right? And so you're sharing that vision. If you've done programs already and you've done something, because I did recommend to start with something, but if you started with something, I would also include a testimonial. So you can get a written testimonial. Like I've had parents write testimonials for me to use, and I share those. Or if you have a someone who's been impacted through your services, someone who's witnessed your passion, you want to have them speak. You want to have somebody in addition to just your voice, because of course, as a founder of a company, we've got to lay down. We can talk about our idea and our passion and everything. But when you bring somebody else to the table that can talk on your behalf, and especially at the point where they're talking and they're not paid staff that are forced to talk, but you have someone that's talking and can share that is just authentic, you want to include that as well. And then you want to just show the impact. And so showing the impact that you've made, and then even show the impact that you plan to make once resources are established. So with the Benevin model, which I highly recommend, and I kind of go over that in other resource workshops when it's specifically on building this event, but you don't ask for money. That's the thing. This is all just making a connection. And so you make this connection with this meet and greet. And it's all about you just sharing your vision, sharing who you are. And then the after effect is, after they've attended the event, then you could reach back out and maybe have a one-on-one, see what their thoughts were about it, and see if you can ask them, well, do you see yourself being involved in our organization in any capacity? So it's kind of a good open-ended question. If they need suggestions or ideas, then you can say, if we're looking for board members, volunteers, or donors, that's when you can kind of lay that out there. Did that answer the question? All right. All right. If we can go to so those are two resources. Definitely want you to follow up with those. What's next? So I have shared a lot about building up to the process, making sure you're grant ready, making connections, being mission ready. So what's next, right? So maybe you found a grant and you've applied for it, and you've received it. What's next? The one thing that you want to definitely do, of course, once you receive that is thanking them, the acknowledgement. But I also want to say is making sure that you have went over the grant yourself, because it could have been some months ago. A lot of times when you write the grant and it's like months later, and I know myself, I have to go back and say, okay, exactly what does this funder want? Because this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship with the funder. So you want to make sure that you fulfill the grant, you do what you said you were going to do. in regards to program, in regards to collecting data. So before you start that program, make sure you have all of those things in place. Make sure that everybody who is a part of implementing this program is on the same place. Because all this goes back to, and you're going to do this for years, even once you're well established and grown, but you're more well established and have years of experience. But you're still proving yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing as a startup nonprofit. You have to come in realizing you're proving yourself. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, I understand. And for a while I didn't understand because I would be submitting these grants, like starting up, and I'm asking them for like 100,000, 75,000, all this money. And then I really had to step back and say, you know what? Do I even have the capacity to steward $100,000 for my business as a startup? And really being truthful with myself, in year one of being established, we weren't ready for a $100,000 grant. We weren't. And I think if we're all being truthful, you have to really look at that. And if you're not, what do we need in order to get there? And so really understanding that's when, because before I'd turn my nose up against a $5,000 grant or just the little grants, because you know what, I'm going to get the $100,000 grant and we're going to be good. And that was the mindset. And so I think a lot of us had that mindset. We're going to get the big dollar grants. And I'm going to, my grant up next to Big Brothers, Big Sisters grant, who are they not to choose me over them? Well, I haven't built that credibility yet. And now I understand that, and spent more time going down, really making sure that we were built for that piece and building that credibility. And so understanding and having the tools needed in order to fulfill the grant, making sure that everybody on my team understood that we've got to do it this way, right? Because this is the way we promised it. And we promised it because we believe that this was the right way to do it. And so even being mindful when you're writing your grants, and that's why I said, making sure you write for a grant that fits you, that you take money from someone where you know that your thought process and your missions align. If you know that a funder believes in something that you don't believe in and you're not comfortable in doing, don't take the money. All money is not good money for you because it's not the right fit, because you're going to have to fulfill whatever it is that donor is giving you that check for. And so that's something that you have to really be ready to agree to. And so, like I said, making sure that you agree with it, making sure that everybody on your team has the capacity to do this, and being really ready, because it goes back to the credibility. You're proving yourself, you're building your brand, you're building your reputation. So it's not the easiest thing. And I remember when we actually turned back a grant, and I just said, we are not in position to do this right now. And this was recently. This wasn't even one that was when we first started up, but this was actually during COVID. And so we were excited when we first got the grant right before COVID hit. And then once it hit, we realized that we're not able to do this. And so instead of trying to fake the funk just to keep some money, we had to just agree to say, we are not in a position right now to use this money. And I think, and hopefully, and what we heard from the funder is they respected that. And so just being an organization, and that's my desire for my organization, and I hope it's your desire, that you want to have, an organization that is known for its integrity, that you are a nonprofit leader that's known for its integrity. And something that you want to look at when it comes to, can I fulfill this grant? Now, let's say you did not get the grant, because this is a process. Like I mentioned, I think in the very beginning, you can be the best writer, you can have the best program. I've been in situations where I've written a program up when I was employed, by a nationally recognized nonprofit, and it was funded. But then when I write a program for my startup, it's not. And so just understanding that there's a lot when it comes to funding, there's a lot to this formula. It's the connection. It's not just the written presentation of a grant, right? It's the connection, it's the credibility, it's the history, it's the experience, it's all that. It's even to the point where I touched on social media, where they're starting to ask this question, well, how many followers do you have? And I'm just like, okay, so now you're going to judge me on my followers. And so there's so many other things that can play a role in why you did not get the grant. And so don't let your nose just get hung up on why you didn't get the grant, but use that as a learning opportunity. So one thing I would do is, if I didn't get a grant, well, I'm going to find out who got the grant. And I'm going to look up what was funded. And just so I can get an understanding of, okay, well, their focus was this. And so that's why we didn't get it. Sometimes funders you can reach out to them and ask for feedback. A lot of times if they've had hundreds of applicants, they may not be able to do that, but it's worth a try. And it also shows that your effort. And so definitely look at doing those few things, even if you got the no. And the other piece, which I think is probably I will say it's one of the hardest ones. It's the stewardship in regards to thanking and updating. That's a whole nother job. It's one thing, you have the grant, you have the funding from your donor, you're excited in the beginning, you're thanking them, you've made that connection with them before, but you have to remain connected. And so, like I said, that to me is a whole nother job, as well as the stewardship. And so going beyond the thanking and keeping them updated without them having to ask. And I know that was one of our learning lessons that we learned. Before they ask, we have to update them before they have to ask, hey, how's that $20,000 we gave y'all? So before they ask you, definitely go ahead and create kind of a calendar of, let's update them and let them know what we've done with this money, or invite them to come see something. And so that stewardship, just maintaining and keeping that connection, and maintaining that you are implementing what you were supposed to implement with that funding. All right. Awesome. And so I want to open the floor to questions. I know I answered one before. I see another one on here. Once you receive grant money, do you report back to the company how it was applied? And so it varies per funder. And so I'll address the funder that may not have asked you to do anything. Because there are some that just, like I've had and more so donors, they may just give you the check, and they may not ask you to report back. And so in that situation, if they have not asked, I would report back. And so, and like I mentioned, having a calendar set up. So maybe it's per quarter that you just send them an update. Hey, this is how we're doing. Send pictures. They love pictures, and just letting them know what the status is, what's been taking place, how it's been implemented. So even if they do not ask, then I do recommend that you do report something back. It's not saying you need to report in detail. Oh, you gave us 5,000 and we used 3,000 for this and 2,000 for this. Don't worry about reporting that. You can just show, hey, through your support, we were able to get additional resources to implement a tutoring program, and this is the impact. And so I would keep it just kind of vague like that if they did not ask. What happens with a lot of foundations, they do ask. And so some may ask for an end of the year report, and they will detail, you've pretty much detailed what you said you were going to do. And so you would report what you did. A lot of times they're asking for the number of people served, the impact. So if you talked about a change in behavior, and so these are the things on the front end that if you just get used to doing when we talked about program development, go ahead and have pre-surveys and post-surveys in place so that maybe when someone enters your program, you have them fill out this self-assessment. And then at the end of the year, or maybe every quarter, you have them do another assessment. That way you're collecting data, right? Having attendance sheets at your programs or some kind of way of collecting numbers, because that's usually what they're going to ask to report. And so it's usually numbers, impact, maybe get in the habit of gathering testimonials. But typically, the funders will detail out when you get the grant. So I know once you get the award letter saying, you won, you received X amount of money. This is when we would like your report, and this is what we're asking for. So a lot of times that they will provide that information to you. So please just make sure on the front end that you create the tools to get that information. And usually it can be an online or paper, but they'll detail that out. But again, if they don't detail it out, I do recommend reporting to anybody who's given you donors, any funding. So that's where you'll see sometimes a lot of these annual reports as well too. Annual reports are good ways of reporting back the overall impact that you've done all year and all the support that you've received. Did that answer your question? Awesome. Let's see. We do have a few more minutes. If there's something in particular that you wanted me to expand on for those that are with us live, I am open to going back and touching base on something that was mentioned. I just really recommend that knowledge is key. I know even with my experience having been in the field when I started my nonprofit, I just made sure that I sought out any kind of workshop, webinar, just information. It honestly was a little harder to find compared to for-profit, where you can, small business workshops, and I would attend those, but the nonprofit world has its differences. And so now I just recommend you seek out knowledge, you seek out information. The library is a great resource. I'm very connected with them, and I know the resources. I know a lot of the resources aren't being utilized as much as they should, and they're free. So I definitely recommend that you utilize those resources. Also, just connecting with organizations that are similar to what you want to do. And so that's one thing that I'm a very, very big advocate on is if you see an organization that is doing similar work, just introducing yourself and even just building relationships in the nonprofit sector. I think that's how we grow together. My mindset is I know my organization cannot serve every teen here in Charlotte. And so working alongside and having conversations with other people that are like-minded, that are impact-driven, is something that I really, really focus on doing. Do you know of any websites to use to search a need in a specific region? So the 2 websites that I did share when I talked about filtering, those are not, you can filter it to any region. So those are not just specific to Charlotte or North Carolina. So if you are wanting to do something in California, you're able to do that filter. You are also able to, I think there's even like overseas options as well. So that's what's so great about those websites. And those are 2 that I use a lot, to be honest with you. And they're user friendly. And even when you are at the library, like I said, go with the plan. If you're going to use the foundation directory at the library, go with the plan. And then the staff there can actually help walk you through. I think that's the great thing. And even with the other one, they have a training and they have staff that are available to help you with that as well. And Jeremy from our library, he's on the nonprofit team for Charlotte. So he has just put one in there as well. So like I said, that's the great thing going out to the library to use their information. You've got the manpower you've got staff that are knowledgeable and available to help you with that piece. But you definitely can narrow it down to the specific area. All right. Well, if that's all, Jeremy, if you can go to the next slide. I have my contact information there. Again, I'm Kim Roseboro. This is a part of our impact learning because I believe in impact. I want to see others impact out in the community. I'm here to support impact, and it all stems from learning. So I hope you all learned something this evening. Please jot down my contact information. If you want to connect, definitely feel free to reach out to me. But thank you for attending. And I'm excited about hearing and seeing some impact being taken place from you all.
Okay. Thanks, Kim. And again, the library has, if you have any other particular questions, Jeremy has put the email address that will go directly to the nonprofit team. This was the team that we designed this series for you. So I would say take down that email address and feel free to contact anyone here at the library on the nonprofit team as well as Kim. So thanks, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this series. It's part of what the library does to fulfill our mission of improving lives and building a stronger community. So also check out the library's calendar, which can be found at cmlibrary.org calendar, as we have robust programming in all areas to improve your life and build a stronger community again. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a good night and good luck with your nonprofit series. Terrific. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.